change in the fundraising sector has never been greater. But innovations in technology are evolving faster than our ability to understand them. Are these advances good or bad? Do they have unintended consequences? And what is the application to the global fundraising sector? That's what we're here to find out. Welcome to the Fundraising AI Podcast, your up-to-date resource for responsible AI for the global fundraising community, hosted by Nathan Kelley and Scott Rosenkrantz.
For the past few years, nonprofits have been led to believe that AI is the strategy, that if they just adopted the right tools fast enough that the future would take care of itself. But that framing is backwards or at the very least incomplete. Today, we're going to talk about AI not being the strategy, but rather a powerful set of tools that either amplify clarity or accelerate chaos. Today's guest sits at one of the most important intersections in this conversation. Kelley Hecht works with nonprofit organizations around the world at AWS, helping them think through cloud adoption, data foundations, and responsible AI deployment at scale. She sees what works, what breaks, and where some organizations thrive and other well-intentioned organizations quickly get stuck. This conversation is not about chasing the latest AI feature or building flashy dashboards. It's about something far more foundational: how nonprofits think about data, how they design for decisions, not just reports, and how they build systems that support trust, stewardship, and long-term impact. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by AI conversations, uncertain about where to start, or worried about whether your organization is falling behind without knowing what ahead even looks like, this episode is for you. Kelley Hecht, welcome to the Fundraising AI Podcast.
Thank you, sir. Welcome back.
It's great to have you. Do you know you get the record for the most number of return visits?
I was so hoping that was going to be the case.
Yeah,
I was really hoping.
The award will be coming in the mail.
Thank goodness. Do I get a jacket?
A jacket with embroidered.
Embroidered.
And it says a big number 5 on it. I think it's number 5.
Is it 5?
I think so. I know it's 4,
at least
but
3.
No, it's
4?
At least 4. But
oh my gosh.
And part of that, I think it's important. You've been such a huge support and underpinning of Fundraising AI since its inception, really before its inception, kind of just even the idea of it, to the point where you mobilized resources from Amazon right away and for 3 years in a row, which is amazing. But you're also a good friend. You're also an amazing thought leader. You have tremendous wisdom, are one of the most strategic people I know in our sector. And so having you on is selfish from that perspective because I like to learn from you. But I also think, there's just so much that others can benefit from in learning from you.
Well, I should just record that one section and listen to it as my morning mantra so I feel better about myself. But
I can play it for your kids.
For my kids, they'll be like, not. What I think is interesting is that part of why I was such an early adopter was because I think I'm one of the people that was really overwhelmed and confused by it all, because I'm not a technologist by background or training originally or any of that. And so I think there's an authentic empathy that I feel for the sector that translates into my desire to mobilize resources and to support people who are, like you, helping to bring clarity and at minimum information that you can trust to a space that we need to understand, but it can feel overwhelming. So
yeah, no, that's interesting. As I'm thinking about it, because you're a curious person by nature. You're a dot connector. You really see disparate things happening and connect dots. But you are also not a hype person, and you're a little skeptical, right?
Yes.
Like in a wise way.
Takes a minute to earn trust. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, it's just like, just because everyone's doing it doesn't mean I should do it. And I think that what makes your role at AWS, but also just in the sector, more grounded, because it's a hard time to understand hype from reality right now.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I can't remember what the exact sentence you said in the intro was, but there was a moment where it felt like Groundhog's Day. Like, here we are again, another innovation in the sector that feels overwhelming. I think that's where some of my curiosity and my healthy skepticism comes from. It isn't actually that I'm skeptical. It's that I'm deeply interested in making sure that expectations are aligned with possible outcomes. And I think when something gets hyperbolic or exaggerated or sort of the issue of the moment, it's very easy to lose sight of what those things are.
So you're a pragmatist and I'm a skeptic.
There we go.
I'm honestly fine being a skeptic. The more I work in AI, the more I see the power of it and the moral imperative of using it. but also the more concerned I get with whether or not we will use that well. And our podcast, in thinking about this, has evolved quite a bit. And it evolved because of what we were hearing from people listening, resonating with the deeper, more philosophical issues that now require practical answers. Versus in the beginning, even when you were on the podcast ages ago, it's about what tools are new, what's coming out, what should we be paying attention to from a more tool perspective. And we're going to talk about this a lot today. It's like perfect on point with this theme of separating hype from reality. One of the things that I think is really interesting from your vantage point, because you now, I mean, your role at AWS has evolved a bit from being mostly fundraising centric for a while, but to like now just all data, all nonprofits. So you get to see how all data is helping nonprofits evolve in their entire ecosystem, not just the fundraising lens anymore.
Yeah, interestingly, I don't know that I ever got to really activate the fundraising aspect of what I do in the AWS role. I was hired, for those that don't know my background, I come from the fundraising space, spent a lot of years there in a lot of different ways. But when I came over to AWS, I think there was potentially a hypothesis that fundraising would be the next natural progression outside of IT to start adopting some of the innovative cloud capabilities, even before AI. But truth be told, that ended up not necessarily playing out in the way that I would have expected, and maybe others too, in that a lot of fundraisers are heavy SaaS platform users. I mean, they have so many products and tools and platforms that they're already using, that space is complicated because it's inadvertently already siloed. So no, I didn't spend a lot of time there. But now, just to your point, I get to see how finance, how operations, how programs, how all sorts of different teams activate around potential.
And what separates success and failure, which we'll end up in. So going back to this, hype versus reality kind of thing, like what do you think the most common misperception nonprofit leaders have about AI today?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I mean, I think with anything this new and powerful, and this is a really tangible innovation that came about quickly, which I think was also different. Like, people could experience it in their day-to-day lives in a way that the outcome was impossible to ignore, right? You could do something so fast, it could source something so quickly for you. So I think with that came a lot of hope around the problems it could solve and ways that it could be deployed and ways it can be integrated. I think the challenge with it, which is something you bring me back to a lot because you really understand a lot of the foundational aspects behind the different types of AI tools out there, is that it's incredibly complex. And so you can get a false positive really easily and really quickly if you don't understand. You can also get a false negative because you use the wrong type of AI tool for the wrong type of problem. So I think that's probably the thing that is holding up a lot of leaders, is that the complexity to understand that is time consuming. And yet without some baseline understanding of it, I don't know that you can fully harness what it can or can't do.
That's a good point. Yeah, I heard this on a podcast where it was like leaders are now, they've led in a world of black and white, but now they're asked to describe the color purple to a team of people that want the color purple, and they're not sure. So I do think that's a good point, because when I started in AI, it was actually in a way easier because it was one really, there were several, but one more profound set of tools. So AI ML, so machine learning, deep learning, was all about taking data, enriching the data, and making predictions. And in the beginning, it was hard to evaluate if the predictions were good and how to mitigate bias, but then that became easy. And then you add generative AI that has, opened this flurry of other tools like agentic and other things. And so, yeah, to that point where the leader just is now like, oh my gosh, now color purple is like, now it's, chartreuse or whatever.
Right.
And yeah, what is that?
It's true. There's also an accessibility aspect that didn't exist when you were coming up and learning AI ML. And that if I'm talking to my head of IT or my CEO and I'm saying, I want to understand the color purple by using this form of AI, and they say no, then when it was the AI ML days, you were sort of like, oh, well, too bad. Now you're like, okay, well, I'm going to go do a whole number of things, some of which are problematic as it relates to the beneficial and responsible adoption.
Mm-hmm.
But I think more so, and this is what is important for the understanding, is that understanding why someone has said no, understanding why you want to use it.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to sound cheesy, but we got to get back to the sort of why behind some of these things.
Right.
And we'll talk about that in a little bit too, around successes and failures and how to embrace them. But I think that access piece is different this time around than it was 20 years ago when you were first playing around with the early stages.
Yeah,
of
it
this.
definitely compounds that fear, or the fear of change, or the fear or just what you need to learn. So yeah, that accessibility and affordability of it, we never saw coming. Like, not in a million
No.
years I would have said you could have a model that had PhD level intelligence for $20 a month or free. And that
Right.
is, leaders know this is that whether or not they are advocating for AI or not, their individual employees are using it in some way. And so that just compounds this additional fear. So,
and to your point, the fear's on both sides, right? So the employee may not bring the use case forward.
right.
And the employer is feeling, in many cases, a desire to lock things down
Right.
for a false sense of security. Which, again, all of this, I think, is the reaction to the pace and the power by which these tools have become available.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're starting to see a little bit of balancing there, which I hope will lead to more successes and more adoption for organizations.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's dive into this idea, because AI in all the hype has been promised to be kind of everything. And with that, AI being the strategy. And at some point you came to the realization, or you pretty much already had it from the beginning, but it just became more clear over time that AI is not the strategy. And that kind of thinking is kind of an incomplete lens.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, has that been in your role at Amazon, how you've seen, and has it been, I don't know, was that because you saw organizations succeed or fail, or was it just the way Amazon teaches AI, that AI is not the strategy, but there's something that's more important that we'll dive into?
Yeah, so you know me, I like to ground the use of the word AI because you taught me this many years ago: predictive, generative, and agentic. It's really important that we distinguish which ones we're talking
Sure,
about when you and I move fast through this. If folks listening don't know the difference between predictive, generative, and agentic, it is important to understand that those are three different use cases. I think what's interesting is, first and foremost, when predictive has been around for many, many decades, that was always part of the DNA of how AWS and Amazon trained and learned, and security was job zero. And so that was really like part of it. Having the responsible and beneficial adoption of machine learning or predictive AI was intrinsic to how the company existed. As generative came up, and in recent years, recent months, as agentic has taken more shape, I think what we see is a balance, a desire to not stifle the pace of innovation that is made possible by allowing the technology to help us address some of the challenges that it brings forward as well, right? And so in that, I think it's about really understanding, what does data governance look like? What do your security protocols look like? Are you as an organization adopting some of those foundational components or infrastructure components before you jump to the excitement of what AI can or can't make possible? That is very much in the ethos of the company, and therefore is something that we always get to advance. But to your point earlier, there's an enthusiasm, there's an excitement, there's an energy that takes on a little bit of a life of its own. So it's also about finding that balance.
Yeah, for sure. I think about my career, and, I knew data was important, but I didn't know that, AI not being a strategy, data kind of is.
It is.
Right? Because now, and increasingly more in the future, that AI is as good as the data that you have. And for most of my career, I think back, and I wore both hats. I mean, I was a fundraising leader, but also I oversaw operations and everything from gift processing. And data was something that we had, but I never thought about it like an asset. AWS is a company that's built itself on the core premise that everything is driven by data. So I don't know, is that kind of formed more solidly in your work here, just that you see the difference maker between organizations that think about data being a strategy or a nice to have?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll leave the AWS thing aside for a minute. If we look at our sector has always known that the information and the data that we have is how we want to drive decision making. And I don't think it's new to us that we want to be data driven in our strategic decision making. I think it's hard. And I think the way that you become a data driven organization, and in particular a data driven nonprofit, at times feels impossible, right? In an environment where funding is restricted, where you can't fund operations, where access to tools feels limited, where you're evaluated on an annualized ROI. Those are all things that I think make it harder to be a data-driven organization. And so as a result, I think as humans, we have sometimes looked for a shortcut. And I do wonder if there have been moments in the last few years where AI has felt like it could be that shortcut. And I think where AWS comes into it is a reminder that there are no shortcuts around the important work that needs to be done. And that AI is extraordinary and powerful in whichever form you want to use it. And it's only as good as whatever set of data it was trained on.
Yeah.
And whether that's your data or a foundational model or whatever the case may be, it's important to understand those things. And so as we head into 2026, I do suspect and hope that we are going to see more organizations recognizing that the real power in AI is its ability to help you create a more data-driven organization by doing more to harness the power of the data that you have.
So to be clear, you said this already, but this is not an Amazon or AWS stance. This is literally the world that we live in now and will continue to be. So no matter what data provider you use, data has to be a central component to the quality of predictions and the quality of interactions that you can have, both predictive and generative, everything working together. You and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but as I think about the landscape in the nonprofit sector, I see tremendous opportunity for small, nimble organizations that don't have a lot of bureaucracy. They don't have a separate IT function that all their data is there, whatever. So I don't know, just unpack this a little bit, because I see small, nimble organizations be able to just create and whatever, and they have a little bit more control of their data, but they don't have the resources. And sometimes the language of things like data lakes and even cloud can seem really confusing for a team of 5 people that are grinding it out, whatever. So that side, but then you've got large federated organizations. I was with Girl Scouts down the street, right around the corner from here this morning. And large federated organizations now are waking up and being oh my gosh, the future is very clear. But by the way, we have data everywhere all over the world, and we need to find a way to consolidate it. So I guess for our listeners who kind of represent both, where are the opportunities and maybe focus points for if you're either one of those?
Sure.
How do you think about it differently? Or...
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the bigger ones have volume.
Yeah.
And what does AI love? Lots and lots of volume, right? It's really what it was made for. It was made for digesting large volumes of data quickly and efficiently. So I think it's about understanding where you are and understanding what the opportunity is for you. If you're a small, nimble org and you can move quickly, great. But if you don't have the data set to move with, or if you don't have capabilities to activate around a data set that you could acquire, then being nimble isn't really going to help you in the long run. The thing that I think about is, and I don't want to deviate too much from where you are with this, but I think about sort of the bookends to the AI. If I watch how conversations that I have with nonprofits of all sizes and all maturities and all structures have evolved over the last, call it 24 months. I think one of the things I've seen is this shift from a problem to a tool, or a problem to a solution that they think can solve the problem. And I'm trying to encourage people to get back to what was the reason they thought AI was the solution in the first place, and what's the outcome they're telling themselves is going to be possible because they used whatever form of AI they used. I think those two bookends of why you want it and what you think is going to be better because you had it are going to be super important for organizations to think about and spend some time getting clear on before they put the tool into place.
So, and I wanted to unpack this too. Is this aligned with the working backwards, and I might be saying that wrong, philosophy, approach, trademark, Jeff Bezos, I don't know, this idea that Amazon's had forever, right?
Yeah.
I think even from original Amazon to all the way through AWS, it's like this idea of working backwards. Is that related to that, kind of getting to the why? And then maybe because I think a lot of people can benefit from that type of thinking and framework. Can you unpack it a little bit? Unless it's proprietary.
No, it's everywhere. We love talking about it. Yeah, there's books, podcasts, there's all kinds of stuff. And teams at Amazon that do nothing but it all day long. I think the framework of working backwards, for those who don't know it, is this concept of starting with an outcome, customer-obsessed outcome, and working backwards from there. And so there's 5 questions that you ask. You start by really getting clear on who your customer is. You get really clear on the problem that you're trying to solve, what their experience would look like. And there's a rigor to the way that you think. And it's called working backwards because you start from the outside and you work backwards to the inside, which candidly in our sector is a little bit different because we tend to start with our org structure is how, or our systems or how our P&Ls are aligned, right? We actually inadvertently start inside out.
Right.
So the working backwards tools and frameworks can be super valuable. And I think they can be valuable for what I'm about to, or what I just shared and observed, which is this shift in people focusing more on the solution rather than the problem in the future state. But I think that evolution is just natural, right? I think when people get excited about something, they focus on it and it becomes bigger than all the other pieces. And so even this morning, I was on a call with someone who was asking me for help with their AI strategy. And I thought an interesting question because there isn't, yes, you can have strategic principles around AI and you can have governance and rules, but at the end of the day, AI itself isn't a strategy, right? It's a tool that's part of a strategy. And so the real question is, what is the strategy for? What are we trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I think and I've had a very similar conversation this morning too. It's like, what are you trying to achieve?
And we were not together this
morning.
No, we're not together. Two different conversations.
Again, it goes back to, look, you've got a variety of tools to accomplish anything. I always use the analogy of like a toolbox at your house. Like, you've grown up to understand the difference between a hammer and a nail. If you got to put a picture on the wall, you're not going to grab a saw to hammer a nail, and you're not going to grab a hammer to cut a piece of wood or whatever. So you learn the appropriate tool for the appropriate thing, but those are not the strategy. The end goal is like, I need to hang a picture on the wall. What is the best tool to use?
Correct.
And not to overemphasize the fact that it's a tool. I've been thinking about this, and I'm curious because like, I think a lot of training in AI has done a disservice for the sector of teaching that AI is a strategy, first of all. So that's why people have that orientation. AI is the answer to everything, which it's not, but it's what are you trying to achieve? And I would say not even tools, but what evolution needs to take place to change your thinking about how that gets done. Because I do think that the set of tools that AI represents is formative, and different and powerful, and that they allow us to think about how to get to the end goal differently. And so I do think that becomes more an evolutionary state, not just being curious about it, but like literally like rethinking the work that we're trying to achieve and then assessing what exists to help us get there.
Yeah. I don't think it's an overstatement to say there is no problem that AI can't help make better. Right. There just is. It's extraordinarily nimble and flexible and powerful and awesome. So it's not about if it can.
Right.
It's about how and why and should. Right. Here is what makes me anxious, if I'm being honest.
Yeah,
and
it's about time.
You don't have a lot of listeners on this podcast, do you?
Or a few.
What makes me a little nervous is this concept of the cycle of AI coming up as now coming back to being data, right? And as a sector, we've had a lot of cycles that have come back to data. And I worry that scares people. I worry that people have memories and experiences and traumas, if I'm being honest, around what that means. And that
seems scary.
Correct. And that it will cause people to resist the connection that must exist between data strategy and AI. I'm not saying you have to pick one or the other. In fact, quite the opposite.
Right.
I'm simply saying AI without data strategy is never going to give you the power and the results and the outcomes that it does with.
Right.
And I hope that for at least those listening, as they continue to exist in their life, they will encourage people to make sure those two things don't get disconnected.
Right.
Because data strategy is going to be super important and is easy. I don't want to say easier, but is more manageable in an environment with AI capabilities.
Yeah, I think what it does is it really sheds a light and showcases that the importance of data no longer just being a luxury, but a strategy. And ironically enough, I think I did a talk on this in like 2017, because when we built our first ML model, I recognized it right away. In fact, my very first, the first model we built, the conclusion was we didn't have enough data, and that if we could secure external data, so now we call, third-party data or enriched data, that was never a concept in the beginning. It was just like, let's take our data, make predictions. Like, oh, wait, do you know our predictions would be a lot better if we had... So data at that time, for the first time in my career, because it had 20 years been a luxury.
Yeah.
Like, Joe puts in his contact reports. He's a good citizen because if he wins a lottery tomorrow, we know that Joe's never coming back.
Right.
And that was a luxury. That was literally, there was no other thought around KPIs around it other than Joe winning the lottery. But immediately in 2017, 2018, I saw, oh my gosh, like the future of our ability to execute on decisions accurately will rest in the collection of data accurately and quickly, but then our ability to like keep on adding to that and curating more data. And now we see that promise amplified 1,000x. So there might be trauma, but there may have not even been a full understanding of what we used to use the term like data as a strategy and not even know it. But now the underpinning, like all AI is math. There's just like tons of math, whether it's predictive or generative, it's all math and probabilities. The better data you have, the better your math will be.
Right. And our industry has really chosen to take perfect data as its kryptonite, right? How many strategies do you know that didn't advance because, quote unquote, their data wasn't good enough?
How many orgs do you know that have perfect data?
Correct. None.
Okay.
And
just for the record.
Exactly zero. And so I think that's the piece where, and when we start to talk about great beneficial use cases that I'm seeing, one is scenario planning. Right. Where one of the things that we now can do much more quickly and accurately is to plan out some what ifs.
Right.
And so let's just assume that our data is incomplete and inaccurate in certain areas. Okay, great. If we don't try to make it perfect, but instead we run some scenarios to see what would happen if, now we can make more informed decisions about our risk tolerance, certain segments that would or wouldn't be worth that risk tolerance, et cetera.
Where you should invest.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so I think that's an example of where what I believe will be sort of the next iteration is a shift in the way we think about data, how to use it, a shift in how we define data strategy. It's not meaning we have all the data lined up, perfectly matched, and now we're ready to go forward with the strategy. It's actually, I think, being able to interact with our data, query it, understand it, learn from it in a more real-time way. I think that's the exciting shift that we're going to start to see more and more of in our specific sector.
Right.
It's already happening in other sectors every day.
It's been driving the other sectors.
Correct.
I mean, it drives them, pretty much, and their retention, customer retention is the sign of whether or not their data is accurate.
Correct.
Because they're able to pivot. And so from a nonprofit perspective, I think it's just super interesting because it does change it from this idea that, one, there is no such thing as perfect data. Data is a journey, not a destination. You'll never be done. You'll never be ready, never done. But also, I think about nonprofits in the historical belief, like even that pre-data lake, so essentially a data pool where data can come in from lots of different sources and then be used. Like it used to be like everybody has to be on the exact same platform all the time. So that literally was not that long ago that we believed that with federated organizations. It's like, well, we'll never get there unless everybody's using the exact same CRM in the same way and every single person is using it. And now with things like data lakes and then MCPs, which can apply to like any data source, can plug into this interface where data can be...
MCP, say the acronym.
So, it's funny. I actually always forget the real acronym because I only know it from the TRON acronym, which is Master Control Program.
TRON.
It's
an
funny.
Unexpected reference on the podcast today.
So I just had this conversation with my son because MCPs came out about a year ago, and it's a protocol that basically it's like a USB drive where all USB drives, doesn't matter who makes them, they operate the same way and they can transfer data from your computer to USB. It works through a standard interface. And Anthropic created MCPs. This is standard interface and made it public to the world. So Amazon and Microsoft and everybody's created their own version of it and something protocol. And I'll remember it right after this. The reason I get it confused because I was like total Tron nerd.
You were? That's such a fun fact about you.
Master control program in Tron is the AI. So the original AI is essentially he is MCP, and MCP basically is literally what Tron is trying to beat at the end, where he throws the disc and he kills it, but then he comes back. Tron 2 and Tron 3.
Tron 45.
Right. So with that said, going back to this idea that you're never ready, you're never done, and it doesn't have to be one standard solution. Like you can have data in lots of different places and bring it together now through whether it's an MCP or it's through a data lake that you can just bring in and then start taking action. And I know something that you brought up a couple of weeks ago, we were on the phone or a little while ago about kind of a reframing of how we think about analytics based on that. So now you've got all your data, you're empowering people to understand that data is like the lifeblood of the organization. It's more than a strategy. It's something, it's an imperative that every person in the organization is deputized to uphold and protect and to use, and it just becomes the underpinning of all things, right? And then we talk about collecting all of it and then looking at, now, what do we do with it? And so that idea of analytics being a traditional, analytics, I've got some data and I want to run a report. So what are you seeing? Because I know you're seeing some really seismic shifts and kind of almost redefining what that even means.
Yeah, I think for most of my career at American Cancer, and then when I was in the consulting side, I think we saw analytics pretty uniformly looked at as a rearview mirror. We were reporting on historical performance, historical metrics. And that's valuable. It's important. Right. It's good to learn from the past. It's good to be aware.
Right.
But it's really a tricky way to run a business.
Sure.
And despite the fact that our bottom lines go to solve really big problems in the world, we are all running businesses, right? Our nonprofits are businesses. I know.
We don't talk about that.
And so I think where that shift is coming in is how we start to join our commercial sector friends in allowing our industry to think about analytics as more than just a rear view mirror, but also the windshield, right?
Yeah.
And the front mirror and the side mirrors. And we're looking all around us and we're anticipating things. And in doing that, our analytics become guideposts and they become stakes in the ground down the road and they become potholes that we can mark and hopefully drive back that way on the way home, right? So we don't have to pick one form. And funny enough, like I've never used all those car analogies, but now that I'm thinking about it, they really work. Like when you drive a car, you have lots of different ways to assess your driving, right? Some of them are digital, some of them are visual. You're looking surround, right? And so I think that there's probably some analogies in there that are going to be smarter than the ones I'm using right now that have to do with pulling that view into the way that we think about operating in a modern world.
Yeah, I think that's so important because, again, this is a business, and not only do, say, board members or stakeholders, donors deserve and require solid business decisions to be made that are most effective, efficient for the organization, but it's just so much harder to do that at all. Yeah. So if you're literally just driving your car, bouncing on the walls, being like, well, that didn't work. Oh, that didn't work. That's
right. You're blindfolded.
That's going to cost
recommended.
a couple grand. And, versus to that point of like series, like lots of different ways to gauge like this or that. And I see, I'm thinking a lot about this, but the future of generosity. So just at least specifically to that, which manifests way beyond just charitable giving, is really about, and probably all life becomes about like hyper-personalization. And you can't have hyper-personalization. So for-profit businesses, this is what AT&T and Nike and everyone is aiming for, is to treat every person as an individual so they experience that organization that's unique to them. And without data and data strategy, it's not even remotely a possibility.
And I have a slightly different lens on this.
I could tell the way you rolled your eyes.
I didn't roll my eyes. I tilted my head Here's what I think is complicated about that. Whenever I hear an analogy about our sector to particularly a commercial brand, those brands don't carry the burden of responsibility that we do, right? Sure. So if Nike messes up your personalization, it's not the end of the world. If someone made a donation because of an illness or because of a personal experience that they've had and you mess up their appeal, it's a much more personal thing that we do in philanthropy. And so as a result, we hold ourselves to a higher standard, which I think we should. The piece that I appreciate is that I think our sector, well-intended, sometimes puts too much pressure on ourselves to know and anticipate and deliver. Instead of, what if we were to open up options so that it was more self-guided? And you and I have talked a little bit in the past about the analogy I use around, I live in New York City, and so catching a taxi. Like, I used to go out my front door and raise my arm and hope that a little yellow cab with a light on was driving by to pick me up. And so the city ran a lot of analytics on where to have taxis and how many taxis to have on the road in order to try to anticipate what I needed. And in today's day and age, I now have a choice of apps where I can call someone to my door, by the way, including a yellow taxi, I can now call to my door. But that shift was that instead of them anticipating me and being there for me the minute I walked out the door, they now anticipated to give me power to ask for what I want. I'm not entirely sure what that shift looks like for our sector, and I don't think it's one size fits all.
But I do think that does come down to that word personalization.
Yes.
Like at the individual level, I think I see a future, ideally, where someone interacts with a nonprofit that feels unique to them, and you work with the same nonprofit and it feels unique to you and others because you have choices or paths that have been designed that allow you to do that. You get stories that are relevant to you, not just I'm a segment or I'm a 50-something white male, so I get this treatment. And so moving to that, and we've always dreamed of this, right? Like microsegmentation, hypersegmentation, what predictive AI with an appropriate data strategy and generative AI together complete that two-sided coin. And we're seeing some really, in the private sector, seeing a response to that because they're measured based on retention. And so they've been highly incentivized to curate these experiences. And I think there's a lot to learn from there. But I won't diminish the importance of those organizations have a much higher tolerance for risk, because if Nike or whoever screws up a campaign, I mean, Twitter, a famous algorithm that was biased in every possible way and their stock price went down, but it turned out people still like Twitter. And so their stock price went up. It didn't affect Facebook, but so that's the
And it might
nuance.
even just be a lexicon shift, right? Like, I think for those, and I think about this a lot for myself since I'm given platforms to speak on, the term hyper-personalization is a phrase that we used in our sector for a lot of times to mean a very specific thing, right? It was your name in an email. It was the content, the variable content in your direct mail piece, whatever the case may be. I think it might even just be about creating some new lexicons so that we create space for new applications of what it means to create a hyper-personalized experience for a constituent. And I do think that where AI is going to be incredibly valuable is in reducing the expectation on the nonprofit to know, understand, anticipate, and deliver, and instead to build those pathways that can be self-driven without fear that you're going to disappoint or lose the constituent or not provide the experience that you want. And I hope we will see the technology used in some of those ways, because I think it can be really special.
Yeah, all of which is not possible without a data strategy.
Correct.
So literally going back to the beginning. But it's true. When I reconcile between the possibility of what our sector can imagine and execute on because of the affordability and accessibility of AI today, and the tension and skepticism and fear around trying new things, that's hard. So as we kind of wrap up a little bit, you've seen a lot of organizations really thrive and succeed, and not just more broadly in nonprofit in general, not just in fundraising, and some that, we won't say failed, but maybe got stuck. Are there any like words of wisdom or observations that you've seen that end up being that delta between those that really kind of power boosted and they're all in the journey, but are seizing the moment better than some that maybe are just not sure?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really lucky in that the span of perspective that I'm given in my role includes a really diverse range of nonprofits, including research organizations like independent research institutes, all the way to nonprofit financial institutions like credit unions and everything in between. So the use cases and the successes and the learnings are pretty diverse. I would say there's a couple things I see that I encourage those listening who want to be part of the successes to consider. And that is, first of all, there is a real honor and respect for that this is a team sport. There is no singular department that can own this. There is no singular person who can be responsible for this. You can certainly have people that you hold accountable for things, and you certainly can have people that bring a greater level of acumen. But I think one of the trends I see around organizations that are really starting to do some interesting and powerful stuff with these capabilities is that sense of bringing the collective team together, which is looking outside of your direct org chart. So it's not, if you're working on a marketing initiative, it's not just looking at your marketing team, right? If you're in IT, it's not just thinking about IT. So that's one thing I see a lot. I think the second thing I see a lot, and I wondered about this early on, is you really need senior leadership support.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that it should be a directive, but it does mean that it has to be supported as a priority and as an organizational priority. Because coming back to that first recommendation, you only have the sphere of influence you have within a department or a team or a program or a business line. So in order for it to be a truly organizational wide effort, you really do need C-suite involvement. And one of the interesting groups we've seen that's been a really great sort of C-suite advocate for that is actually the chief financial officer.
Oh, okay.
So if you're interested in this and you feel like your organization isn't yet where it needs to be from an AI adoption and governance and data strategy perspective, go ask to take a member of your finance team or your CFO to lunch and see if you can talk to them. Because I think they have both a balanced perspective and they often aren't pulled into tasks like this. So we've had a lot of great conversations with CFOs.
Yeah, I know you've been able to convene quite a few. And I think that's a really good take on that. So as we've just started 2026, if you could project out, so 12 months. So in the life cycle of AI, that's 365 cycles.
Times 24 hours in a day, times,
exactly. So like lots of cycles.
Yeah.
Like, where do you think this conversation rests at the end of 2026? Is it the same? Is it a delta between those that did and those that didn't? Is it that delta become a chasm?
I do not pretend to know the answer to that question. I really don't. I sincerely hope that we will see the hype cycle continue to settle, which I do think we're seeing. I think we are seeing people breathe a little bit differently. I do think we are seeing more and more of the standard capabilities, particularly of generative AI, embedded into tools and technology that we're using every day. I think we will stop talking about it as a standalone thing, and when it will start just being part of the way we live, which I think is great.
We've been saying that now for a while.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, there's not even going to be this conversation.
Right.
It's just going to be.
But I do think what is extraordinary and what I hope we're talking about 12 months from now is the acceleration of what's possible. There's so much that our sector is filled with dreamers and hopers and believers and hard workers and visionaries beyond all else, right? And I think about how possible it is to bring those visions to life now in a way that it just wasn't before. So I'd hope people, despite what can be sometimes a very oppressive news cycle or a stressful day in the office, will take a minute to reconnect with why they went to work in the sector in the first place, why they wake up every day to do the work they do. What is that hope, that vision, that outcome, that future state that you imagined when you first took this job? Allow yourself permission to believe in that again, because there are new capabilities that could allow it to become so, and the world needs more of that.
I love that. Yeah. I think we're now seeing the possibility of what exists if we're willing to dream and take some of the practices, to bear and make sure
Sure.
that you're building a responsible organization that's centered around data strategy. But I remain, well, all the fear and everything around AI, I remain really optimistic because the same reason is that I see the hardest working, most passionate, under-resourced, which means scrappy people in the world.
Yep.
That given these extraordinary tools to do things, like extraordinary people can do extraordinary things with these tools. And so until proven wrong, I'm going to be, hopeful. So, all right, one last bonus question. And this is not, I'm just curious because I've been thinking about this lately and I asked this at a dinner party the other night, but if there is one piece of technology you can uninvent, what would it be?
Uninvent? Well, I'm a mother of teens, so take any number of apps that are, I'm a critical thinker. I love thinking. You and I joke all the time about I've been writing on LinkedIn for a long time, typos and all.
Yeah.
And I don't use technology to write my posts on LinkedIn, right? I enjoy the critical thinking.
Unless you're asking ChatGPT to put spelling errors.
No, I'm not. I'm not. So I like the critical thinking. And so I think some of the technologies that I would undo are the ones that limit our critical thinking. Whereas, and you and I have talked about this, like a lot of the tools in the early stages of AI, and when people were first starting to play around with generative, they're thought starters, right? They're to get you off of the stuck position and into the thinking position. So I think that's a good thing to think about is as you're using these tools, what's getting you thinking again? Because I think that's beautiful.
I just read an article about, especially younger generations, now the purse is like coloring books and crayons and things like that. My son's friend just traded in her iPhone for a flip phone. She literally ordered a flip phone, a iPod Nano, and a digital camera. And for that exact reason, like, you know, in early 20s.
My teenagers back into the disposable Kodak cameras.
Right.
Right? Yeah. Which are like the surprise of what your photo is back
amazing?
again.
Isn't
right?
That amazing? Yeah.
So
what's old is new again.
These things come full circle.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's probably one of
Love it.
the things I would change. What technology would you undo?
I mean, if my wish came true, this podcast wouldn't be possible because I would actually undo the internet.
Really?
I would uninvent the internet.
That's dark.
It is. But if I think about a time, once the internet became a thing, everything, I mean, magic, like change. And I don't, to be honest, know that humans are even supposed to like be able to comprehend all the world's information all the time, 24/7. It's so much. But what made me think of this is that my wife ordered some postcards, some vintage postcards off eBay for Christmas. And they're from like the early, like the 1920s and 30s and 40s. And I was just reading one on the back of the day and it was like Sally Smith, Brooklyn, New York. No zip code, no nothing. And
just
I'm like,
Sally.
What
Find
the
her.
hell? And then I looked at another postcard, and they all got to the people.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, so zip codes, actually I looked this up because zip codes actually didn't take effect until the 60s. But I'm like, what was it like in a time where it was just Sally in Sally homes in Brooklyn, New York?
That's very different. Then you don't want to undo the internet.
Oh, yeah.
You just want to go back and experience the time when it didn't exist for a minute.
I remember what it
you
was like.
You wouldn't make it 25 minutes in an environment that did not have the internet.
I don't know. Yeah, it's naive and it obviously can't happen, but I think it's an interesting thing to reconcile with what's important in life because I was a fundraiser pre-internet and the value of my worth was my Rolodex. And it was the number of people I had on my Rolodex that I could take to lunch and tell a story and have a conversation with to enact change.
I disagree. I think the value in your role then was your ability to create connection and relationship with people. And the Rolodex was merely how you remembered to get in touch with them.
It was my CRM.
And by the way, that's still the case with you. You connect with people through podcasts. You connect with people on stages. You connect with people through virtual webinars. So I'm going to hold you accountable, sir. I think your connections are as strong, if not stronger.
It might be a Twilight Zone thing where, say this happens, then I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to function. And I'm in the fetal position in about 12 seconds. So granted, I just think it's fascinating to think about AI, yes, and the acceleration of all that. none of that would have been possible without the internet. And then the internet brought on social media and all those things. So
Sure.
I think it's really interesting. So I love having you on here again. Thank you so
having
much.
me.
Thank you for all you do for me as a friend, as someone who just brings wisdom and guidance and perspective to like difficult, big things, but also for our sector. And of all the people I know that live and breathe this sector in every essence of your being, this is you. You wake up every morning with a belief in the power of humans and human connection and what we can do together. And I just admire that about you. And I know so many other people who do as well.
You're very kind. And thank you for getting me over my hurdle of thinking I couldn't learn about AI. I am a walking case study that if I can learn about it and even get my my AI practitioner certification.
Big deal.
Many others can too. It is doable. And I look forward to 12 months from now, seeing what the world has done because of this powerful and exciting capability.
Awesome. Well, thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll be back with another episode of the Fundraising AI Podcast. Kelley Hecht, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Nathan.